What's going on, Badger Nation? Welcome to the PPC Den podcast. Olena, we've got a special episode for the people out there, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. It's really important. It's really important for all people who work with the clients and want to have successful collaborations and avoid any misunderstanding.
Oof, very well said. Yeah, I think there's two main groups of people that listen to the show, and people from both parties will get lots of value with this, which are people that do PPC for clients or their employer, or they hire people who do their PPC for them. So like brand managers or brand owners or sellers or whatever we want to call them, e-commerce brand owners. Those things are, there's certain things that you need to get right in order to have good relationships. So Olena, you had this really cool idea for an episode where we actually interview an Ad Badger client and actually talk about like, why do we think the relationship's going well, with the hopes to give people out there, whether you work with PPC-ers or campaign managers or whoever, or you're a brand owner yourself, or you're an agency yourself. We're just sharing our perspective on what makes a really good relationship work well. So I think people will really enjoy it.
Yeah. Communication between the clients, between the agency, it's pretty important to be on the same page during all time. So today we decided to record this podcast just to show how sometimes misunderstanding could influence on business, on achieving results in a bad way, and if it's everything works perfectly, maybe in some not some perfectly, but good, it could achieve our results much quicker and better.
Yeah, and Olena, we actually interviewed your client, Dan, from American Mutt Tools, and you actually have some American Mutt Tools on your desk, I believe, right now.
It's not actually like multi-tool, but yeah.
Yes. All right. Are those knives? You have knives on your desk at any time?
Not every time, but yeah, sometimes it's pretty useful. I actually also have a multi-tool, but
yes,
I didn't take them here.
Yeah. So, Olena, ready to slice and dice a high ACOS to bits and pieces. Yes. So we got a really cool opportunity to interview your client, Dan. Honestly, really impressive entrepreneur, really impressive operator. I was really impressed by so many of his answers and how he thinks about hiring and managing and thinking about goals for his company and managing the people that are managing his PPC. I think there's a lot to learn from how he thinks about working with clients. And honestly, like, he's a major component of why the relationship is so good. Like, he came to us already a fantastic client and with really good practices that are able to get a lot of like great work out of people that he works with. So he's going to share how he approaches client relationships. We're going to share sort of a little bit about what we think worked well here. And without any further ado, let's jump in to the episode.
Oh, let's do it.
I've launched campaigns and picked keywords. I've got my bid, set placements too, and bad mistakes. I've made a few. I've had my share of wrong keywords, but I've gone through. We are the PPC Den, my friends, and we'll keep up the rising to the end. You two are the PPC Den. We talk about Amazon. No time for mannequins, 'cause we fix the gambit of the world.
I was really fascinated by this idea, and Olena actually introduced this idea for an episode, and I thought it was a really cool look into relationships that e-commerce companies have with their freelancers, their agencies, their contractors, their vendors, and a unique look between some Amazon marketers and their client, and sort of talk a little bit about what goes well and maybe some experiences that you've had in the past. And really what I hope to create here is an episode where whether you're an e-commerce brand, an entrepreneur, and you work with SEO people, PPC people, designers, so on and so forth, how to get the most from that relationship. And if you're a freelancer or a contractor or an agency person, hear from the other side too. So Olena, introduce yourself. I loved that you slacked me one day a couple of weeks ago and you're like, hey, I have an idea for an episode. And I thought it was really interesting. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about, tell us all a little bit about your inspiration for this episode.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I'm so happy to be here today and recording this podcast, especially with our client, Dan. So actually, I can introduce myself like a big fan of Adbadgers. So I'm a listener since 2019, actually, when I have started to work with Amazon. And for me, it was always a new knowledge and new testing, new ad strategies. And I'm really happy that I'm able to implement them with our Adbadgers clients. And I'm working here for 9 or 10 months. And I got this idea actually because when we have started a work with Dan, he mentions that he is looking for some partnership, not just for agency, not some contractor, but partnership. And actually, our communications are what built pretty accurate. Everything was clear, understandable. And for me, it was, I just wanted to take this, put in some frame and hang on the wall, oh my gosh, it's ideal. It's just ideal. Our partnership, our collaboration with Dan help us to boost sales. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes it's more difficult when Amazon changed something accidentally in their algorithm. Yes, as we all know who work with Amazon, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So well said. That was poetic in terms of the relationship is so great. I want to just capture it and frame it and put it on the wall to sort of look at and observe. And I also want to extend that analogy, also sort of put it under a microscope and be like, what is it about the relationship that works? Because so often we hear, oh man, I was working over here. And we hear e-commerce companies say man, I was working with blank so-and-so. And it's like they didn't even care. It's like they were asleep at the wheel. It's like this, that, or the other thing. And then sometimes you'll hear from, the other end of the table where it's like, man, I was working with this client and they had no idea what they were talking about. And they were telling me all these crazy things. If they only listened to me. So there's a lot of frustration. And I think when it goes well, it is super nice. And it is an amazing idea to talk about it. So to set the stage a little bit more, as people on the show listening may or may not know, Adbadger isn't an agency. We are a software company, but we have a small roster of clients that allows us to stay really, really close to the craft of Amazon advertising. That is amazing to sort of bounce ideas around that we can maybe incorporate for the software, all of those good things. So we can approach it in maybe a more unique way than traditionally, which I think is really cool. It's one of my favorite parts of Adbadger. And welcome, Dan. Olena mentioned that you are indeed a client of Adbadger. And I'm so fascinated to sort of hear your story about what it's been like to work with clients, what skills you think you could share to other e-commerce companies to help them have better relationships with their teams that they work with. So how would you like to be introduced here? Because you have many skills and you've done cool stuff. Yeah.
Jack of all trades, master of none, I think would be an accurate description of me. Good at a little bit of everything, great at not very much.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. Just to build on what Olena was talking about as far as the partnership goes, I think the biggest thing for us would be open and consistent communication, right? And that goes for doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. That's important. But also clear data flow, right? So a sharing of the data. So I think a lot of these relationships go south is when, for instance, the agency might be pulling a report from one date, and then you might be pulling a report from another date, and you both say that you've got the same thing and you're looking at the same thing, but you really don't. So I think a big key for our success has been open sharing of data. Everything that I have that's Amazon related, Olena and Alfredo have. And I try my best to keep that updated on a weekly basis. And if things go, if say inventory turns for the worse or whatever, we update them via email, almost try and immediately do that. But I think as soon as we're touching back on the do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be done. Obviously, things happen, delays happen, but just being upfront about it. Because as soon as you try and hide the fact that something didn't get done or we're off track here or there, the relationship just goes south. And then you constantly have that thing in the back of your mind saying that, I really got to check on them,
Yeah, so well said. I was giving a presentation one time and someone raised their hand and asked like, hey, how do I know if my agency that I'm working with is good? And I literally said those exact words, like, do they do what they say they're going to do when they do it? Like, it's literally, can you show up and be where you say you're going to be when you said you're going to be there? And if for some reason you can't be there, did you did you get ahead of it? Did you say like, hey, due to this, that, and the other reason, this happened, maybe whatever it is, doesn't matter. Are you in that communication loop and the sort of open transparency? It's so vitally important. And I think it's a lot of times I see people doing the work sometimes want to like explain away or obfuscate or like hide something that maybe hasn't gone exactly as planned, which I mean, it happens all the time, right? No account in the history of any account or marketing campaign has ever increased 10% every single week to infinity, right? Like there's valleys and troughs, peaks and valleys. So it's like, it's so vitally important to like have that open and honest communication. And Dan, like, was it always like this? Did you have to learn that lesson to sort of share a lot, to sort of do things to get to that level of communication?
I would say that I did have to learn that, not necessarily just in my, Amazon career journey, whatever you want to call it, but in my corporate life before this. That's kind of when I learned it. I think it's important as to always think of yourself as like a server, almost like I'm trying to just, Olena have everything that she needs to do her job as good as she could possibly do it. And if she doesn't, what can I get her to do that? Because at the end of the day, we want to be rowing in the same direction, pulling in the same direction, however you want to say it. And yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing. It's just, again, it might sound like a broken record, constantly communicating, but giving information.
Yeah, constantly. There's like one question that a lot of contractors can ask like every day, or agencies. It's just like, am I on the same page with my client? Am I on the same page with my client? And that also holds true, I think, for clients too. Like, does my vendor know exactly what is important to me and like has all the information that they need to do their job? And it's not automatic. Like, it's actually really hard to get on the same page. Like, it's hard to build that shared vocabulary. It's hard to get that shared vision of like what happens on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and like what should each party do in order to like stay on the same page, because it does take a lot of energy just to have that communication side of things, but it's vitally important. I think of my own experience like hiring writers or this, that, or the other thing in the past, and sometimes early on in my career I would hire them and then just like sit back, and like I hired like a blog post writer 8 years ago. And I just remember like sitting back and being like, okay, all of my blog post problems are solved. Like I'm going to have perfect blog posts every time. And I don't need to worry about blog posts anymore. And eventually like 2, 3, 4 5 weeks into it, I'm just like, what is actually going on? Like, I'm getting blog posts that like I didn't really want or didn't really expect, or like it's not in the style that I wanted. And it's like, I blamed myself. Like, well, I didn't tell them any direction. Like, I just sort of sat back and just expected this person to read my mind and magically understand everything. And it doesn't really work like that. And Olena, I see you shaking your head. When you're in an account, I'm curious, like when you're in an account, an Amazon advertising account, and you're like actually making changes to a bid or a keyword, like down in the weeds, the most smallest scale, a level of optimization with like surgical precision, how do you connect those optimization activities all the way back up to maybe something qualitative that Dan said, something like it'd be great to move sales on product X or this, that, or the other, like, because, we start way up high with like a generalized goal, an ACOS goal, a total ACOS goal, revenue goal, market share, whatever it might be. And then how do you sort of connect the dots all the way down to like the individual optimization? I'm curious how you think about those things.
First of all, of course, when we start our collaboration with the clients, like our work, we ask them their goals. What is your expectations? What is your goals? What is your expectations? What you want to achieve the next month, 3 months, and the next year? And of course, our main goal for this is defined. Are we able to do this or no? If we see that yes, market currently is so a lot of competitors, yes, and maybe it's we need a little bit more time to achieve this. We're honest with this. We're always honest, and we say what we can do, what we cannot do right now. Yes, but of course we will try to do like our best. And we keep constantly communications because it's pretty important to get all possible knowledge about the product, about the niche. Yes, we are like a technical specialist. Yes, so we know everything about Amazon, how Amazons work, but we need some additional information about each product to optimize this perfectly and to achieve these goals better. We always keep communication with Dan, and sometimes I can just write to him, Dan, I need your help. Please explain me what's this and this. And he jumped quickly. And it's pretty important. And I don't feel that, oh no, I'm like a specialist, so I cannot ask, because I know I'm pretty open to with Dan, and he always update about this, and sometimes check, sometimes he also can send us some ideas what he is thinking about, and we can say also, yes, it's pretty good, we will test this, or no, maybe for this time we'll just keep things in this way. But we always discuss and we always communicate through our weekly calls, through messages, and and it's pretty important. And also for us, it's pretty important to update clients what we do. Yes, I know that sometimes it takes some times to make a notes, to make some quick recap, and but it's also help not only for clients to see, but also help for us to check and also be updated. It's help us to achieve goals quicker and better, and I'm pretty happy with this.
Yeah, I love what you said at the end there, that it actually helps you achieve goals more easily.
Yeah.
It sort of directs you where to go and what to do, having that understanding. Dan, what would you say if you were to, talk to a peer from another e-commerce company, and, they were about to make a hire, Amazon marketer of any kind, and they were to ask you hey, what does your perfect meeting structure look like? Like, what kind of meeting should I be having with my agency or my contractor or my freelancer on a regular basis? How would you sort of structure that meeting in a way that would give you all the information that you think you need, and give the contractor or the agency all the information that they need? Like, what format or questions do you think every agency conversation should include?
Oh, I think that each meeting we need to go over the overall goal. And I think it's important as a client not to move the goalposts, right? When we started with Ad Badger, we said, we are here to lower our tacos to this percentage point. And we've kept that over the months, even though, sometimes I want to go lower or go faster or whatever. Right. So each
it's
meeting.
So tempting.
It definitely is as a client. You always, it's like every week I want to tell Alfredo and Olena, okay, go a little bit faster. But if I do that, I'm just shooting myself in the foot. There's no use. So each meeting we need to go over, how are we tracking?
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, I did it. When I ran my own ads, I'm a very go with the gut type of guy, right? Yeah. So, when I'd be running my stuff, if things weren't going the right way, we're going to push that throttle to 110%, and you end up just not, it doesn't work out. It doesn't, especially with something that's as kind of, I'll call it arcane as PPC, right? There's some science, but there's also a little nuance to it. But going back to your question, as far as the meeting structure, are we on track with the overall goal? And then, if there's some campaign outliers that we need to discuss, then we talk about those during the call. And also, again, I might sound like a broken record here, but I think Olena can attest, in the meeting, does she need anything from me? Do I need anything from them? I think that's really, really important. Trust but verify.
Yeah. And I'm sort of curious too, like what tools have made the communication easier? There's so many tools out there these days. You could send voice memos, you can send Looms, you can share project management boards, you can just use email. What tools have you found most effective with working with people helping you with your business?
So I'm a big believer in email. I guess I'm a little old school in that regard, but as far as like saying, what needs to be done or what I'm thinking or what they're thinking, we do all that over email. We also use a ClickUp, and then as far as sharing the data, we use Looker or Google Data Studio, whichever one you want to call it, and then just kind of the Google's overall spread of products, whether it's Google Sheets or Docs or whatever. It's a really great way for both sides to have the same information at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you mentioned ClickUp. I think ClickUp is one of my favorite tools over the last few years. It's true to Dan's point. It's like, can the person you're working with write down what they are going to do and then actually follow through and do the thing at the time that they said they would? And I think just like for any contractor or agency listening, it's like, that's really our job, is to like collect as much information as you possibly can from the client, what they want, when they want it, like what are their goals, to sort of help clarify, like, because like our job as service providers is to like understand, like, is what the client just said a realistic goal? And like, can it be achieved? And like, how do we know that it could be achieved? The hardest conversations are sort of talking to someone who's brand new, with like out of sales history, and they're saying like, oh, in 90 days, it would be nice to be at X. And it's like, well, what's the history of these campaigns? Those that I think are the hardest conversations to have. And that's actually a fantastic question to ask, Dan, because it is true. There are some people that I talk to sometimes that tell me a goal of theirs, and I sort of have to say like, oh, well, the keywords related to your product only have 10,000 searches a month. There's no way we can have 10,000 sales, 10,000 orders a month if there's only 10,000 searches. Maybe if we're really lucky, we'll get 10% of those overall searches for 1,000 sales. I'm curious, how can e-commerce companies have a framework to sort of set realistic goals? Like, it sounds like you came to us with a total ACoS goal. How did you know that was a goal? And like, tell me about like the evolution of your goal setting in your company over the years.
Well, I think that the total ACoS directly correlates to the P&L. So it's a great goal in that regard. It makes the math a lot easier as far as on a daily basis, are we, making enough money? I mean, that's what we're here to do, right? So that, I've always been drawn to it just because it's a number type goal. Obviously we look at the ACOS and all that, but those are all derivatives of how to get to the total ACOS.
You had a total ACOS of X, and you asked Ad Badger, can you give me a total ACOS of Y? What was your process like to actually determine Y? Like, how did you know that Y was achievable, or how do you consider setting goals when talking to any kind of contractor that you're working with?
Yeah, I think, just doing research online, you can kind of figure out what people's average total ACOS is. And then I think as the client or as the e-commerce brand that's not well known, you kind of need to have some self-realization that, hey, I'm not Nike, and a 2% tacos and doing millions of dollars in sales is just not realistic. And maybe it is one day, but I'm not at that point. So just having the self-awareness to define what's accurate and what works on your P&L, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's important.
Was there ever a time where you realized that some of your goals maybe weren't as realistic, like you had to learn some lessons there?
Yeah, I'd say just every day I realize that I'm wrong. So, but when we first started on this Amazon journey, I guess you could say, we thought, the tacos was going to be, man, we can do like 8%, and coming from a Shopify background, this is going to be so great. Our conversion rate is going to be through the roof. And you quickly realize that's not the case. And it's, double or more that number that you originally wanted. And I think it goes back to just do your research. I mean, there's plenty of people out there, whether it's in the groups or on Reddit or wherever, that are going to spill the beans to what their tacos is, whether through bragging or needing help. And you can kind of cipher through and figure out what the average should be. I mean, you could run that calculation just using your click-through rate, or your CPC rather, your conversion rate, and the product price. And it's pretty easy that way too.
Yeah. Like, in order for me to achieve that goal, my conversion rate would need to be 300% better. It would need to be, from a 3% to 9%. It would need to be so much higher.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Things like that. So that's really valuable. So I think the takeaway there is like looking at your baseline, talking to a lot of people, and then sort of establishing some kind of, okay, if I'm at point A, I can get to point B, perhaps. And then once you're at point B, you can set another target, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's a great outlook. I also think too, like, what happens when a goal isn't achieved? That's where what we mentioned earlier about like communication, like why wasn't it a hit? Like what did we do? Why did we think that would work? What actually happened? Doing a post-mortem like that of like a goal that wasn't able to get completed, get achieved, I think is so valuable.
Just having the self-awareness of the market that you're in, and what you've been doing on your side and what the agency is doing on their side. We have a great example. Olena and I talked about this yesterday, actually. We launched a couple new products, right? And if you look at the overall average, yeah, our tacos has gone up this month compared to last month. But when you kind of isolate those mature products and look at the month, okay, well, the tacos is still coming down on those. So it's just my actions of growing as a brand that are causing that number to increase. So being cognizant of that, if you're looking at these weighted averages, be cognizant that, if you go and launch, 50% more products in one day, your tacos, your ACOS, your CP, every number is going to go up, and not the way that you want it to. So just being, cognizant. I'm going to sound like a broken record this whole podcast, it seems.
No, I mean, it's such an important trait, right? Like being self-aware enough. Like, is what I'm saying realistic? How do I know it's realistic? So I think the takeaway there is like, use your baseline. Like, really try to be as honest and open as you can. And you mentioned something too. I do this too, where it's like, I call it like napkin math, where you're just like, okay, I imagine with the Shopify store, thinking about moving over to Amazon, it's like, if I can achieve a X% conversion rate, and then I can have a X% total ACOS. And like, anytime I do that, it's like, wow, if we can increase our traffic by 25% over the next 12 months and our conversion rate can go up 17% over the next 12, it's like, yeah, that's super nice. But, it's similar to like the, everybody has a plan until like you get punched in the face, famous quote from Mike Tyson. It's like, yeah, like then you get like hit with reality and it's like, oh, actually like increasing my traffic 25% over the next 12 months is incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive and takes a lot of time, energy, research. And it's not linear. Like it just doesn't magically go up every month. And again, that's where like inserting that iterative process of like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Did it work? Yes or no? What can we do to try to improve it in the future? I think is so vital. I always try to push people when they do reporting. And Olena mentioned it earlier, like reporting isn't just a thing that you give a client and then a client peruses through it and says, thank you and goodbye. A report is like one step in that iterative process where it's like an opportunity for the service provider to grade themselves, to sort of grade how things are progressing, and then give a diagnosis and then be a doctor. And like, well, based on the data, we have determined that like this was working super well. We're going to do more of it. This we need to drop and rethink that over there. And I think reporting is very much a tool for the person working on the campaigns. And I think that's so important for a lot of people to get, because I feel like a lot of times I hear agencies and contractors sort of say like, oh man, reporting, it's like I have to make this thing. I don't even know if my client reads it. And that's a perfect opportunity to like actually ask your client, like, what kind of data do you want? Like what kind of data is going to be important to you, like to make the decisions that you need? Here's what our clients normally ask for. Do you like this report? And then circling back to that, I can't tell you how many times, I've made reports for people and then 6 months go by and they're like, oh, I haven't actually looked at a report in a couple of months. I think about other things now. Well, let's rework those new things into the report. So yeah, I think reporting could be an amazing optimization tool, like as important as, doing bid optimization and changing campaign structure, because it lets you reflect on all of those things. And yeah, I'm curious too, like, Olena, what do you say to like the PPC optimizer, campaign manager out there that's just like, this conversation that Ad Badger's having on this show, it's too much. Like clients just need to listen to their agencies, do what they say. The agency knows best. And like, they should just give all the information to the customer because like they've seen way more accounts and like it all comes from the agency.
You just said you just got a really great example about doctor, yes, and a patient. And when some person has some problem and go to the doctor and tell about this problem, and doctor said, okay, just take this and go away. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a really bad collaboration because yes, I'm a doctor. I was studying, I don't know, 7 years, 10 years, how many years, and yes, and I know everything. No, it shouldn't work like this. It mustn't work like this because it's also always communications. But sometimes, for instance, when the clients say to us some goals, like we discuss, for instance, about tacos, about ACOS, about spend, yes, and our goals is just to reduce spend. It's really like your goals, yeah? You really just want to reduce your spend? We don't think so, because the main goals for every business, it's profitability. Mm-hmm. In some case, maybe it's brand boosting, brand awareness, expand brand awareness, and something like that. But it's always profitability. So, and we usually explain that, okay, like reduce spend, it's not a problem for us. Yeah, it's not a problem. It's quite easier just to reduce bids, pause some unprofitable targets, pause unprofitable campaigns, and yes, and we will be happy. We will be happy. No, of course not, because we lose our ranking. Our competitors will be higher than we. Yes, and like for a long term, like. Mm-hmm. Where will be and we explain it, and yes, and usually clients agree with us and say yes. So we suggest a different ways how we can manage this, how we can optimize this without losing ranking, without losing any positions, and be on the top. Sometimes it's take a time. Sometimes we cannot promise that, okay, you will work with us 1-2 months and you will get these results. No, sometimes it's like 6 months. Sometimes it's 5. It depends. It depends. Different needs, different product, different price, difference. Yes, a lot of different metrics. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing little, you just dropped it in there, which was where a client suggests a goal and, I want to reduce spend. And then I think a big mistake that a lot of agencies do is like, they just say, okay, and they'll just go do something that maybe they don't necessarily agree with. They don't necessarily think is a good idea. And I think you said it really well there. You just dropped it in where it's like, client says a goal. And then you sort of ask them, like, are you sure this is your goal? Like, because if we go and do this, like this, that, and the other thing might happen. And I think like that's so vital to like their relationship perspective. And I guess what we're saying here too, like, yeah, like agencies should be like a client's doctor, their potentially their therapist, their electrician, like they actually have to go and fix the thing at the end of the day. They're like coach, they're like, all this stuff. So it could be really, I think it's really important to like, if you're an agency, really evolve like what you think you do. Like if you think that all you do is like go in and change some bids, it's like not actually. Like you really do want to communicate and talk and like figure things out and like find out why the client is suggesting a particular goal and like work with them. I think that's such a missed opportunity if like that's not being done. So absolutely love that. And I'm curious, Dan, I want to almost like bring it to like tangible steps because there's so many e-commerce companies and people that, I talk to, they come to us and they're like, hey, like a couple of years ago, I worked with those people over there. And like, I felt like they never understood me. And like, I'm so frustrated. I'm just going to start. And then I did it myself for some time. And then they end up like getting frustrated at Amazon. They're like, oh man, Amazon. So I think like, I want to like give people like a framework almost of like tangible things to do almost like through the week. So I wanted to just flesh out some of the things that you mentioned so far on the show and just see if we can add any more detail. So you mentioned you do a lot of email communication. You sometimes look at ClickUp and you sort of really focus on giving clear goals and anything else that we can sort of like tangibly like give people. So like if they feel like they've been struggling with their agency partners and they want to like the next time they work with someone, they really want to get started on the right foot. Like how would you coach them to really get the most from the relationship?
So once you set your kind of North Star goal, don't change it drastically and sporadically. I think that, that just steers the whole ship off course, right? And then going back to the data flow, make sure that you're giving them everything that they could possibly need. And that's for selfish reason too, right? If we're giving the agency everything that they could possibly ever need, we're taking away every excuse in the book that they could possibly have to not perform. So obviously things happen. So that doesn't mean like we must get to this number by this date or you guys are fired. That's ridiculous. But just making sure, being a servant, making sure that they've got everything that they need. Because I think, as a brand, and you're going to hire a PPC agency, you got to understand these guys, I think, want to do PPC. They enjoy it, right? So the more information you give them, the more they're going to almost want to work on your account. So that's kind of my trick, I guess you could say. Now, you could also say, well, Dan, you're adding a lot of work onto your plate, but this is a team. I mean, if you hired someone in-house, you'd be doing the same thing. You'd be showing them everything. You'd be talking to them every day or whatnot. So I don't look at it as if I hire an agency, then you guys should do it 100%. And I'm totally hands off and I don't have to worry about it. That's almost ridiculous.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there is some work that is involved in hiring someone, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah, there is some work. It like sometimes I'll be like, man, it'd be great to have like this person on the team, and then I'm like, I don't have time to set them up for success. It's like once I do, then we can hire that person because like we'll be able to give them the framework and the SOPs and talk about the goals and like we'll have fleshed out goals. I think that's so vital. I just want to pause here. If you're watching this on YouTube, Olena has the most perfect lens flare going on behind her. The Canadian sun.
I just want to, yes, just wanted to say that. Can I please turn off it?
It looks like it looks amazing. It looks like you're like ascending into the heavens.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing, but I don't know how it will be for video. So can I just turn off it?
Alrighty, so Dan, I think like as we sort of wrap up this conversation, the big things we've learned, egoless communication, it sounds like, sort of like setting goals and like being really honest with them, trying to communicate as much as possible, that it does take work to sort of share that information and have conversations when goals are hit or when they're not hit and sort of talk and understand. And I also think like if there's a couple yes or no's that people should have with the people they work with, it's like, it sounded like, yes, they should be reliable and trustworthy. Like if they say they're going to do something, they better be there. Cause like you can't get to like these higher level and higher order things if like they said they were going to send you a report on Friday and now it's next Wednesday. It's like, got to establish that. Oh, I had actually one really interesting question, which I hear come up a lot with brands before I get to maybe my final question with you, which is like, what do you say to the brand owner or the brand manager who's working at a company and they've been tasked to go hire a PPC agency and they don't know PPC? Like they don't know how to assess if someone's going to be technically good, or they can't really visualize like what a realistic goal should be. How would you recommend that person bridge that gap? Because I know you were managing your own PPC, so you had some kind of background in it. So you sort of knew sort of like, does this person really know what they're talking about? But what do you say to the brand owner or brand manager who's like, how do I hire my first agency? Or like, I've been having bad experiences and like, still don't understand PPC. How can they sort of figure out who to work with?
It's kind of a tough question. I would say that, going into it blindly and just interviewing and then picking the person that you just meshed with the best is probably a terrible idea. You've got to, there's no way around it. You got to do the work. This is, this isn't a 3 hour. I mean, I guess for some people it is, but for me, it's not. Yeah. You got to do the work. You don't have to know PPC like Olena and Michael here know PPC, but go understand what they're talking about and just kind of, absorb the information, listen to a couple podcasts. That might be helpful. That would be my, spend 6 hours on Saturday or Sunday and learn about it. And then, find some agencies, talk to them. And, a lot of them will offer client referrals. So that's one way to kind of get people's opinion. Go look on web. There's a ton of review websites. It seems more every day. And just kind of pick through them, understand that some of them were probably, paid to post or whatever, but you can find the nuggets in there. Also, the negative reviews actually are really good insights. So I would look at those and see kind of what went wrong, because when things do go wrong, people will write, whole paragraphs and stories about how it was or wasn't their fault or whatnot, but there are nuggets in there. That's kind of how we came to you guys.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm curious too, like, what do you think Ad Badger, Olena and Alfredo and myself and the whole team here, what do you think we could improve upon?
That's another tough question. We have meshed together pretty well. I would say, again, I'd love for you guys to go faster, but I'm shooting myself in the foot if we do that. I never really haven't too good of an answer for you. I would just say keep doing what you guys are doing. I don't know if every relationship is as good as the one that we have, but I guess you try and make every relationship like the one that we have. Just continue to be communicative, whatever. Keep talking to each other.
Yeah.
And just if we don't meet goals, that's fine. Just let us know. Let people know. That's a big thing. As soon as that trust degrades, the rest of the relationship until it splits, and it probably will split if it happens, where we're not doing what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do it. It's a recipe for disaster. So just being open about anything that happens.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, like when you were making that decision, what was it about Ad Badger that actually like made you say like, okay, like let me give these folks a chance?
The one thing that was said on kind of the discovery and the call was that you guys would share a ClickUp board. And we use ClickUp internally. So being able to see and know, okay, then, if I know that Olena is going to do a negative keyword sweep on Wednesday, I can go in and I can look at the history tab and say, did she do it? Yes. Okay. Then it just makes that trusting but verifying a lot easier. Right. And then, at some point, in the first couple months, you're like always checking the history tab, or did they do this? Did they do this or whatnot? But as you see that, they're on top of it, you can kind of let back a little bit. Obviously, I wouldn't just totally not look at anything that they're doing. That would be really dumb. But yeah, the sharing of the ClickUp board, I think, is one thing that sets you guys apart from pretty much everybody else. And doing that made me comfortable. Like, okay, well, if they're going to share that, I'm going to share all this stuff, and it's just meshed together really well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, Olena, sharing the perspective of like putting the frame on the wall of what like a good, effective, great client agency relationship looked like, framing it. Have we done it? Have we done it?
Communications, constantly communications. Yes, constantly updating, clients updating. If you see that something wrong, please like go ahead and let clients know. It's really important. It's really important. Keep reporting, tracking. Yeah.
Yeah, very well said. Staying on the same page. I think the thing that comes up for me, have you ever heard the like little story about like 7 blind people walk up to an elephant and like one person like touches the elephant's leg and it's like, oh, an elephant is like a tree. Another person like touches the elephant's tail and is like, oh, it's like I don't know, something else. Have you heard the story? I'm butchering the story.
I've heard this story, although I recall it about as well as you do.
Yeah. It's just like all the 7 people are like touching a different part of the elephant, and they're like, "It's like this. No, it's like this." And I think like the better synchronization that clients can have with their agencies, and putting energy into it, because it's not automatic. It does take hard work. It takes effort to like build a ClickUp board and share that and actually use it. It takes effort to share a report and then customize it for what the client needs. Like, does this report make sense for you? It takes work on the client's side to actually think about like, I think these things are going to be important in a report, and then actually like come back a couple of weeks later and be like, you know what? I actually think I need different stuff, because like it does take work. It takes effort to make a good relationship last. So Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experience. It's an absolute pleasure to be your PPC management team.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
it's great.
Yeah. Thank y'all for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, right on. Thank you, Dan.